My name is Russell Spatz. I am an alcoholic, and
Hey, Russell.
I'm going to talk a little bit about my deal. It says each alcoholic in his own language and from his own point of view talks about how he developed his relationship with God, and that's what I'm supposed to do. And I'm going to try to key it towards the 12-step. I don't think it's going to be like, well, I may be wrong. I don't know anything about you guys, not much about you. I know I like you because for various reasons. First of all, I don't see any teenagers in here. Look at you guys. You guys look like you have actually experienced life to a certain extent. Have you been around for life? Have you figured this thing out yet? Pretty crappy, huh? Pretty crappy deal, right? Did somebody tell you if you came today and stopped drinking, it's going to get better? Oh, man. So let me explain something to you. If you're a little disappointed, if you're a little discouraged because you got sober and it seems like life is beating the shit out of you, there's absolutely nothing wrong. You're just dealing with reality for the first time, not drunk, so you're not imagining this. This is pretty much the way it is until you get cancer and die. But here's the good news. The good news is you're going to have a real good time with it, and so that's what I'm going to talk about. So I'm just going to, as I said, my last drink was January 25th, 1981. So I'm in my 44th year of sobriety. So I'm just going to talk to you about what I've seen, what I've heard. It's like that farmer's commercial. We know a lot because we've seen a lot. So I don't know everything, but I know a bunch of things. I've seen a lot of people. I was trying to figure out how many meetings I've been to. And as I was trying to multiply it out, because, my mind isn't that good because I'm 75 years old, as I've tried to multiply it out, I said, no, that can't be possible because I go to about 3 or 4 meetings a day. And you may say, well, that's because of Zoom. And that is true. But the truth is I was going to 3 meetings a day before Zoom. As I was driving into the office, I'd go to a 7 o'clock meeting at the Carl Gables group. Then I'd go to a 12 o'clock meeting most of the time. And then on the way home, like I used to go to the bar, I'd go to a 5:30 meeting at the call room. And then sometimes my sponsor would call me up and say, hey, let's go to this meeting. Or I'd go to a step meeting. I'd follow one of these characters around. And I'd go to a step meeting so I could, somebody that I wanted what they had. And maybe I'd drive them. So I could go to 4 meetings a day even before all this. And so I've been around for like 44. So I was trying to multiply it out. So, I don't even know what that multiply. If you go to 4 meetings a day for, let's say, just 20 days out of the month, just for the heck of it. What is that?
800.
It's 800?
80 meetings.
80 meetings a month?
80 meetings a month.
How many meetings is that a year?
960.
So let's say you do it for like 44 years.
So let's say it's like 40,000.
Yeah, 40,000.
Man, I'm getting sick already. I'm feeling old.
It's like a lifetime.
You think that's possible? The 40,000 meetings?
It's 40,000 hours.
40,000 hours. Holy shit. That's not counting all the other crap.
Right.
So I guess what I'm saying is look, there's a lot of people that do that stuff. I'm just telling you, I'm just going to try to be as honest as possible as to what I did. You don't have to do what I did. You don't believe how I believe. You can have your own opinions. You can say that guy was pretty much full of shit. Fine with me. I have no problem. I ain't here to fix anybody. I'm just here to do what they told me to do and what I believe the Lord wants me to do, and just to try to carry a message. So at least you'll know the message is semi-authentic. Because I say semi-authentic because I don't. One of the things one of the things that God has done for me is removed. What's that promise?
Fear of people.
Fear of people.
Yeah.
I used to be so scared about talking. What are they going to think about me? I don't have that anymore. And so I'm pretty much going to say what's on my mind, and sometimes it gets me in trouble. But, I'm going to, at least I'm not going to lie to you or bullshit just to make myself,
It won't bother you.
It won't bother me much.
Right.
I just want to bother other people.
Right.
I'm just here to bother other people. That's what I wanted, because it ain't Well People's Anonymous, so chances are I'm going to bother somebody, just the idea of somebody walking out of here and being mad at me.
Bonus.
For a week or two.
Bonus.
Excites the shit out of me, you know what I mean? And that's, but in any event, so I'm just going to tell you the truth. My truth. This is my truth, my opinion, my life, and you take, what do they say, take what you like and leave the rest, or whatever it is, and that kind of thing. I don't usually read from books, but I know it looks a little ratty. That's Dr. Sabal and the Good Old Timers. I started reading that. You can see it's kind of ripped up and torn. I started reading that about 24 years ago, or a little bit longer, maybe 30 years ago. I don't know. It's been around for a long time. But I'm reading a couple things out of that for a reason. But I think what I'm going to do is talk about, so what I mean, so after all this period of time, I've seen them come and I've seen them go. You understand what I'm saying? I've listened to a lot of people. I've done a lot of things. I've experienced a lot of life. I've raised 4 children. I got 8 grandchildren, and one of my kids isn't speaking to me. She cut me off. No, it's not speaking to anybody. Put it that way. So I've gone through the whole deal. I've gone through the health deal, the cancer deal 3 times, and so I know I haven't gone through everything, but I've gone through a lot of stuff. The money problems and all that stuff that keeps you up at night at 3 o'clock in the morning when you're 10 years or 20 years sober, whatever it is that keeps you up at 3 o'clock in the morning and goes bump in the night. I've been through all that stuff sober and dealt with that thing. So I know the thrill of victory and the agony of defeat. Some of you guys know what that is. You got to be a little old to know about ABC Wide World of Sports, but so I've been through the top and the bottom, and all that stuff. So, the ski jump. So I'm just gonna
ski jump of
I'm
life.
gonna tell you the bitter truth, and then you can go out and commit suicide, and that'll be it. And what happened? Why'd you drink again? I listened to this guy rough. I said, what's the point? I might as well. It's not gonna get better. So if they say in the 12 and 12, I believe it's the 12 and 12. I get them mixed up. They say in the 12 and 12, the way we get a new perspective. And you're free to tell me if you know, is by repeated humiliations.
Big book.
It's the 12 and 12. Okay. Well, you may be right. I don't want to get into an argument. We ceased arguing with everybody. So I don't have to have the last word of that. So if they say somewhere in our literature, we get a new perspective on things. And if you believe, like I believe, I've come to believe, I believe very strongly in this, is that alcoholics are insane. That's why they hardly even bother me anymore, because they're crazy. It's just, what's the point? So if you believe, I believe that alcoholics are insane and I'm insane, and my best thinking got me into this deal. The bottom line is, if you probably need a new perspective. And they say all over the place in our literature, pain is the touchstone to spiritual growth. So I'm pretty sure I'm on safe ground when I say, and I say this not because the literature says this, because I've experienced this, is that you sort of grow up and become an adult through having the shit knocked out of you for about 20, 30, 40 years. It's nice to get a pat on the back. It's nice to have a lot of money in the bank. It's nice to have people accept you. But there's nothing like a good kick in the ass. It's nothing like an IRS audit to get you on your knees and say, Lord, help me, you know what I mean, and getting closer to God. It's nothing like bad stuff. So if they say, and in the 7th step, they say something like, see, the problem is I can read all this stuff because we're all brilliant. I can read all this stuff. I can try to figure it out for myself. I can be intelligent. I used to be intelligent. But you don't get any wisdom unless you go through the experience. In other words, if I'm going into the jungle with the animals and they're going to kill me or anything, and there's some guy all dressed up in a suit, in a jungle suit he brought from Saks Fifth Avenue or something like that, and he said, $100, I'll try to get you through the jungle. And there's another guy, he's sitting there and he's been through the jungle 10,000 times and he hasn't shaved or showered for 10 years and he looks all gritty and, what's that scar there? Oh, that's when a tiger bit me or something. But he's been through the jungle. I'm going with the older guy. Because when a man with experience meets a man with money, the man with experience will walk away with the money, and the man with the money will have walked away with an experience. So the one thing I do have is I have experience. So if the big book says, it's one thing to read what it says. It's another thing to experience it in your life, and you say, holy shit, this is what they're talking about. Because if you don't experience, it doesn't really become a part of you. And in the 7th step, it says something, 6th and 7th, it says humility, whatever that is. I don't want you to think I know what it is. I do believe I've experienced it from time to time. Humility is really the basis of all the steps. And one thing is you want to get humble, whatever that is. I'm not sure what that is. So if humility is the basis of all the steps, and that's what we got to shoot for. So somehow every step we're talking about goes against our nature, goes against our intuition, and gets us humble because what alcoholics wants to be humble, there's some good-looking blonde at a bar. He says, so what's your name? So what do you do? Well, I'm a humble guy. You know what I mean? I'm an attorney. What do you I'm God's gift to humanity or something. What kind of bullshit is that? I got a car, I got a Porsche out there, whatever. So humble is the exact opposite of me, and I do arrogant characteristics. So the bottom line is that's what I do best. I do arrogance and defiance best. That's natural for me. It's not natural for me to say things like I don't know or follow directions. It says in the big book, it says we are undisciplined. Forget about me. You don't have to buy into what I say, but if you want to buy into the big book, if you at least accept the basic textbook, it says we are undisciplined. So we allow God to discipline us. So how are you disciplined? When I was a kid, I was disciplined because back then we had something called spankings. You guys have probably never experienced that. Once we got nice and sweet. But my father would spank me. No, spanking is not the word because I don't think spanking when you do it with a belt. Is that spanking? Spanking's like a hand. I got the belt. You understand what I'm saying? Man, that was. Anybody here get the belt? Let me tell you something. You get the belt one time. It's a very good teaching device. I'm thinking if we use the belt in here, you understand something? There'd be a lot more people fucking sober. I'm thinking. I'm just saying. I'm not promoting this. You know what I mean? But I'm saying if we had a big fucking belt, you know what I mean, and feed them within an inch of their lives, they'd cut this crap. I don't want to hear the God thing. They'd cut that shit out. You know what I mean? We can get serious in this place. God knows there's been some sponsors I want to use the belt on. But in any event, you get out that aggression. I'm married for a long time, so I got a lot of untapped aggression in me. So that's like a belt. That's like a daily belt, But so if any event, if I have to get a new perspective, and they're telling me that repeated humiliations and the final crushing of our self-sufficiency get me to where I got to go, and I've been crushed over before, then I'm thinking that I was at my best when I was 31 years old, and it was 3 o'clock in the morning, and I thought my life was over, and I had lost everything, including my self-respect. And I got on my knees, and I asked Jesus to come into my life. Now, you don't have to do that. That's what I did. And I'm a Jewish kid from New York. So I'm thinking that I was so beaten down. I was so without hope. It was so bad that some guy that I didn't even know was on a TV set, and he said, some preacher. And he said, if you're at the end of your rope and there's no hope, he says, you ask the Lord to come into your life, and everything will change. And whether you want to say I believed him or not, or had faith or not, I did the act. I got down on my knees and I said the sinner's prayer. And now I know, not only looking back, I sort of understood down the road, because sometimes you don't understand things much, and so you look at it in hindsight, that it worked. No, I didn't stop drinking, because God doesn't work that way. It's not like God relieved me of this thing, and then all of a sudden you're relieved. Sometimes that works. It's actually worked for me in a couple of things, but when I've gotten down on my knees, and that's how I'll tell people. I said, why don't you ask? I've done everything. I said, have you asked God? I said, why don't you do that, But sometimes you ask God to remove something over and over and over again. You get down and you do all that sort of stuff, and 20 years later it's removed, because, 20 years to God is not a big deal. Quite frankly, it's a big deal to you. He rearranges the furniture in the way he wants to do it, and all I know is I ask God. So I'm thinking that whatever was going on at 3 o'clock in the morning, 3 a.m., 44 years ago, was probably what humility is. I think that's where I was at my humblest. And I'm also thinking that 30 days after that, when I had my last drink, because apparently it worked, whatever that thing, because I continued to drink, and then 30 days later, man, I had my last drink, at least up until now. And then I went to an AA meeting like a week after that, and there was 100 or 150 people, 200 people in the room, a South Dade room, and I didn't know one person. I was all alone. Didn't have like a sponsor guide me in or anything. I was all alone. And now this may not be a big deal to you. I mean, there's some people you hand up a white chip and they don't pick it up. You know, you ever see people do this? He says, well, I'll put it over here. So at 3 o'clock in the morning, you can come up later on and not embarrass yourself or something. Well, that's what happened to me is they picked up this white chip. And I stood up in front of, and I am one arrogant know-it-all son of a bitch. I graduated with departmental honors in mathematics. I was going for my PhD in algebraic topology. I went to law school, became a division chief of the state's attorney's office, trying murder cases and major crimes. I don't fucking get on my knees for anybody. I put your fucking ass in jail. That's what I did for a living. And I liked it. I loved putting people in jail. I also liked, believe it or not, being light on people and helping them out if I thought they were decent. But you ever read something in the paper about a horrible, horrible crime, and you say they ought to shoot that guy, they ought to kill that guy, they ought to do that? I would go in the office and they'd hand me that file and they'd say, you're going to prosecute that guy. I was the guy who could actually do something about it. If you're an egotistical, arrogant alcoholic, it's the best job in the world. You got power, you got all sorts of stuff, you can put people in jail, you can do that shit. Great job for an alcoholic, you know? That's the deal. So you know I don't know whether I had humility, but I know I'm not the guy who stands up in front of 200 people at 31 years of age and walks up to the front and announces that he's the dumbest guy in the room and he doesn't know anything and he needs help. And I shot up like a son of a bitch. And I walked over there and I picked up that white chip and I was happy. I was happy to do it. So I absolutely believe that. I don't know what humility is. I really don't. But I think I had it then. I think I had the night I picked up my white chip. I think I had it the night I got down on my knees and asked God to come into my life. When I knew nothing about AA, knew nothing about the steps, knew nothing about anything, didn't have 44, I wasn't in my 44th year of sobriety. And I think what I've been trying to do is to sort of get back to that deal for the last almost 44 years. And you know something? I'm an alcoholic. I'm insane. And part of my insanity is that ego that's always trying to get back. And the things of this world that I'm always trying to be attracted to and to grab and to have in order to make myself feel good. Yeah. And the truth of the matter is that, every problem I've been through, everything that I've been through that has been problematic, every time I've been whipped or, put down or crushed and all that sort of stuff is, I think, God's gift to me to try to get me back to where I was at 3 o'clock in the morning, almost 44 years ago. And let me tell you something. I don't know how long you guys have been around, but I can promise you this. I can't tell you how many people I have seen in AA drink after 5, 10, 15, 20, or 25 or 30 years because they got away from that deal. They can tell you that they stopped going to meetings. They can tell you they didn't do the steps. They can tell you that they didn't have a sponsor. They can tell you all this bullshit. That's the mechanics of it. But the reason they stopped doing it and they stopped going to AA meetings is because they couldn't get that feeling. They couldn't keep that feeling going. Because alcoholics are not nice people. No, we're all nice in here. We're all sober. We want to try to help people. We can be wonderful people. But this disease is a disease that's cunning, baffling, and powerful. My sponsor used to say, the problem with alcoholics is they get too well too fast. They get too well too fast. They get the girl, they get the car, they get the deal, they get the 10 years, they get the 15 years, whatever it is. And then all of a sudden they're not going to a meeting because they're going to a Broadway show, or they're not going here because they're going there, or they're worried about the car, they're worried about the thing, and life starts beating them down. And I'll tell you something. You start feeling your oats and feeling like you're really something. Let me tell you something. I was a nothing. That's the truth. On January 25th, 1981, I was a nothing. I knew I was a nothing. And I was always going to be a nothing. I used to put something in my body that turned me into an almost. When you're nothing, almost the top of the world. That's what alcohol did for me. It took me from a place of nothingness to really I'm something. Yeah, it took me from not being scared to ask a girl to dance to going up and being able to ask her. It took me It took me from a place where I was scared to a place where I thought It took me to a place where I was worried about what the group thought about me to a place where I thought I owned the fucking group. You know, that's what alcohol. You're telling me alcohol's the problem? If I didn't have alcohol, I would have probably killed myself before I was 18 years old. It's the only thing that worked for me. I worked, no woman, no car, no amount of money ever worked just as well as just a few drinks. And so I drank it. If it worked for me today, the way it worked for me back then, I'd still be drinking it. But unfortunately or fortunately for me, alcohol stopped working for me. And the real sad deal about my life, it stopped working for me about 10 years before I realized it stopped working for me. I hurt a lot of people, you know. But the key is, now you get sober, you're not drinking, they're patting you on the back, maybe you're doing meetings, maybe you're doing conventions, maybe you're going all over, you got a wife, you got a house, you got everything. Hard to get back to that 3 o'clock in the morning deal. Hard to get back to that deal when you're driving around town in a Cadillac or something like that, you got a job, you got money in your pocket. Hard to get back to that deal, you know? And most people never are able to keep that thing going. Because it is cunning, baffling, and powerful. And you have to, the people that don't make it says they can't live a life which demands rigorous honesty. And the honest part about this disease is you're still a nothing. And the only reason you're sober is because of God. And it doesn't have really much to do with me. And it's a hard pot. That's a bitter pill to swallow, unless you have a complete change of mind. And that's the deal. So I never worry about people that are going through crap in AA, you know, because they might actually make it. I worry about the people that are just getting all their shit back, you know, and all of a sudden they just don't have time, you know, because they're busy. Because they're busy. They got to wash the canary or something like that, so they can't go to a meeting. So that kind of thing. So I remember watching a TV show called Kung Fu. Anybody remember Kung Fu?
Sure.
You know, I can't remember everything in my life. I don't remember what I had for breakfast this morning. I can't remember anything. I'm a mush. But I don't know about you, but there's certain things I remember in my life from day one, like when I picked up the white chip, there's certain things I remember in my life that they're just like there. I remember them, you know? I don't remember 40,000 meetings, but I remember that one meeting I saw Al Kennedy. I remember that, and I talk about it, you know, 40 years ago, that one meeting, you know? And I remember watching this one Kung Fu episode. And, I mean, it's fiction, you know, but I believe it's like true. Well, it's true in AA. I can tell you this, it's AA true. It's life true. Where the Shaolin Temple is, every year they pick out one student that's going to be a student. They're going to spend all their time training this guy. And they had all these kids. They're all like 8 or 9 or 10 years old. They all gather around the Shaolin Temple. And they're all sitting there. And I'm watching Kung Fu because, like, I'm into TV, you know, and that kind of stuff. I don't know how old I was when I was watching this, and there's like 10 or 15 little kids, and they just sit there in front of the temple because that's what they do. This is how they pick. This is how they pick you, you know. And it starts raining. Kids are still sitting there. It starts thundering. The kids still sitting there. 2 days later, the kids still sitting there. But there's like half the kids now. Half have left. And then it starts snowing or some sort of shit like this for like 2 days. And then the other half of the kids were left. And then it's beating down sun, you know, it's like 3 weeks or a month, whatever the hell it is. These kids are just sitting there. And then finally there's like one kid left. And that's the Kung Fu guy, David Carradine, you know. Mm-hmm. There's one kid left, you know what I mean? And you think they're going to come out and get him, but they don't. They leave him there for another 3 days. And then when he's just about ready to fall down or something like that, they come in and they grab that kid. That's the kid they take. Mm-hmm. That's the kid who makes it. That's Alcoholics Anonymous. Trust me, that is AA. That is exactly Alcoholics Anonymous. Out of 200 people that walk in here, one will make it more than 20 years, and the one who make it more than 20 years will be, half of them or 90% of them will be whack jobs. Mm. You don't have to believe me. You get to find out for yourself about this deal. You go to a lot of meetings, you see all these people. You know, I had 10 years, I had 15 years, I've been around for 20 years. How long have I been in AA? I've been around AA for 40 years. I had 22 years and I drank. You'll see it. You'll watch it if you pay attention to it. You see all those names on the board. You got 5 or 6 names on the board. You know, so here's one guy. One guy has 5 years or something like that in the month of November. Well, I guess he's the only guy who came to this room in the month of November and said, I'm new. Where's all those other guys? That's like every room in the United States of America. Maybe you'll see some person with 20 years or 30 years. You see, it's just a sparse amount of people. You imagine all the people that came in November to this room in November and picked up a white chip. It's like one guy. That's the way it is all over Alcoholics Anonymous. We don't know because we all meet here. It looks like it's really working. And it's working better than anything else, but you know, that's the deal. So I want to read something to you, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about Step 12. Sometimes when I do Step 12, it's like a fun thing. I talk about some fun things you learn in AA and stuff like that, and I might talk about one thing, but I'm not even interested in that right now. I'm interested in a whole different deal. So I'm going to read some stuff from Dr. Bob and the Good Old Timers because it means something to me. I started reading this book, Wilson. I think Bill Wilson is great. Don't take anything I'm saying here from, like, I don't like Bill Wilson. He's wonderful. He wrote all this stuff. He's great. A lot of people, I want what Bill Wilson had and everything like that. But I want to read some. This is a book, and I really suggest it. We really want to see. They say, really haven't seen a person feel who has thoroughly followed our path. If you want to learn about thoroughly following the path, you want to learn what the path is. If you really want to, if you want to be one of the guys, if you want to be that one guy that they took in the shot, and you want to find out about the path, read this book. This is about the path. This is about what they were actually doing. Now, I'm going to warn you something. If you read what they were doing, you're going to realize that it's not happening in AA anymore. We're not doing what they did. Believe me, we are not doing what they did in AA back then. Nobody here has gotten down on their knees and gave their life to the Lord, you understand, before they were allowed to go to a meeting, and that's what they were doing. Nobody here was going for prayer and meditation with the Bible, you understand what I'm saying, every morning, and that's what they were doing. Nobody here in AA is doing what they were doing. You understand? That it's just not, I'm not saying yes or no, I'm just telling you, read the book. Don't be scared of it. Read it. You know, read it. So let me just read a couple things. This is Bill Wilson. See, Bill and Bob, I used to like, the guy I want to admire is Bill, because he wrote everything. Everybody knew about him. He is Mr. AA, the guy who nobody ever heard about. The guy on his desk who had that chart about humility. The guy that nobody knows much about is the guy named Dr. Bob. You know what the name of this book is? Dr. Bob and the Good Old Times. You need to, I'll tell you something. If you're brand new, you want to know all about Bill and everything he wrote and everything he did. But I'll tell you something. You get to be around 15, 20 years sober, you really want to get to know Dr. Bob. Mm-hmm. He's the guy, I don't know who sponsored who, but he's the guy who said to Bill, the last words he said to him, he said, Bill, let's not screw this thing up. Let's keep it simple. When somebody tells you, let's not screw this thing up, keep it simple, they're not like complimenting you. It's because they see something that's going on in your life that's problematic. If you know anything about Bill, you guys are all interested in the book he wrote when he had 3.5 years, or the book he wrote like 12 and 12 when he had 15 years. But you're not interested in the fact that 4 years after he wrote that book, he was sucking on LSD, and he thought he was going to kill himself. You're not interested in the book he wrote after that. You're not interested in the essay he wrote after that, where he said, I got screwed up because I took my eye off of God and I started worshiping AA. You're not interested in that deal. That may scare people off. Dr. Bob was a whole different deal. So let me just read you a couple things from this deal. And because you're entitled to your own opinion, but you're not necessarily entitled to your own facts. So let me see. This is what happens when you're... here we go. So this is Bill. This is Bill 4 or 5 months after the white light experience. 4 or 5 months after I wanted God and he came. Is this the God of the prophets? And the doctor says, hold on to that thing. This is Bill who he said, but soon worldly clamors, mostly within myself. You know, the blonde, the brunette, the car, the job, blocked out this is Bill, 6 months after, finding God and stopped drinking. In the early days, she recalled, Bill said to me, Henrietta, I don't think we should talk so much about religion or God. You ever hear that in AA? Anybody hear in AA people coming up to other people saying, you talk too much about God, or you're going to scare with a newcomer and everything like that? You know who that came from? That's Bill Wilson. In the early days, Bill said to me, Henrietta, I don't think we should talk so much about religion or God. I said to him, here comes the belt, well, we're not out to please the alcoholics. They have been pleasing themselves all their lives. We are out to please God. And if you don't talk about what God does and your faith and your guidance, then you might as well be the Rotary Club or something like that, because God is your only source of power. Finally, Bill agreed. That's Bill Wilson. Now I want to read you a couple of other things. This is Bob Smith, 12-stepping, Clarence the Brewmaster, who had one of the most successful groups in Cleveland. Doc Smith came in later and took over. He sat on the edge of my bed and said, this is Clarence, he was 35 years old. He said, well, what do you think of all this? Then he paused and looked at me doubtfully. This is how Bob Smith, 12-step people. I don't know if you're ready yet. You're kind of young. So Clarence says, I was down to 135 pounds. I had no job, no clothes, and no money. I didn't know how much more ready I could be, recalled Clarence. Still, I had to convince them I was ready. We run around trying to convince other people they're ready. Trying to tell other people, they say, no, you don't understand it. We're trying to convince them they're ready. You had it back then. You had to convince them you were ready. Then he asked, do you believe? Then Bob asked him, first question. Don't hit the newcomer with the God. First question is, do you believe in God, young fella? He always called me young fella. When he called me Clarence, I knew I was in trouble. Well, what does that have to do with it? Everything, he said. Well, I guess I do. Guess nothing. Either you do or you don't. It's somewhere in the big book. God is everything or he's nothing. Half measures of hell is nothing. You guys ever read that? You ever wonder what that... They wrote that in 1939, 38. You ever wonder what they were talking... This is what they were doing. He says, guess nothing. Either you do or you don't. Yes, I do. That's fine, Dr. Bob replied. Now we're getting someplace. All right, get out of the bed and get on your knees. We're going to pray. That's 12 steps. You think you're doing AA? You're not doing AA the way they're not following their path. Now, I'm not saying you should do this or not. I'm just reading shit. I had a conference-approved material, by the way. You got people running around the AA Nazis saying, well, yeah, but that's not conference-approved. Yeah, but the Bible's not conference-approved. None of this is conference-approved. Once they figured out, once people in AA, there's this great essay, that he used to attach to all my emails. But there's this great essay. We say once in the 1950s they figured out that you could get people to stay sober for 5 or 10 years and you didn't have to do any of this shit. The old AA was gone. Once they figured out you get like 10 or 15 years sobriety and go around rooms and do this sort of stuff, that was the end of AA from 1939. I don't know how to pray. I guess you don't. But that's all right. Just follow what I say, and that will do for now. Just follow what I say. I did. Now, this is my favorite line. This is why I read this thing. I did what I was ordered to do, Clarence said. There were no suggestions. There were no suggestions. Yep. He was the guy outside the Shaolin deal that was going to do whatever he was told to do, because that's how badly he wanted this thing. Dr. Bob was always positive about his faith, Clarence said. If someone asked him a question about the program, his usual response was, what does it say in the good book, the Bible? Suppose he was asked, what's all this first things first? Dr. Bob would be ready with an appropriate quotation, seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all things will be revealed to you and added to you. Later on, he said this. Just a couple of other little ditties that I don't think you know about because it's not a big book. Dr. Bob donated the Bible to the King's School group, where it still rests on a podium at each meeting. Inside is an inscription. It is the hope of the King's School group, whose sobriety this is, that this book may never cease to be a source of wisdom, gratitude, humility, and guidance, as one fulfilled in the life of the Master. It's signed Dr. Bob Smith. That's the co-founder. That's the difference between Bill and Bob. An early Chicago member wrote that they usually resorted to such quaint evasions as the fellow upstairs in order not to frighten or antagonize agnostics who were coming into the program. Dr. Bob was the first group leader I heard refer simply and without ostentation to God. He cited the Sermon on the Mount and as containing the underlying spiritual principles of AA. And you got people, if Dr. Bob was here today, who was one who didn't falter, would tell him that he's violating the conference. He's not reading from conference-approved material. So all I can say is when I started getting my ass in trouble, after, 10, 15 years sobriety, and I needed help and it wasn't working for me, I started turning my attention from Bill Wilson to Dr. Bob. Do whatever you want to do. As Dr. Bob himself said, I don't think we can do anything very well in this world unless we practice it. And I don't believe we do AA too well unless we practice it. We should practice acquiring the spirit of service. We should attempt to acquire some faith, which isn't easily done, especially for the person who has always been very materialistic. Well, I'm pretty much talking about everybody in this room, including myself. Following the standards of society today. But I think faith can be acquired. It can be acquired slowly. It has to be cultivated. That was not easy for me, and I assume that it is difficult for everyone else. So I came into Alcoholics Anonymous, and they say, if you want what we have and you only got any late to get it, then you're ready to take certain steps. And the guys I wanted what they had were guys like Dr. Bob. I hang around these guys that had 20, 30, 40 years, and that were talking about the stuff they're talking about in this book, and I wanted them to like me, and I wanted what they had, and I did, and the truth is, I sort of like did what this guy did without even knowing about it. I did what I was, when they gave me a suggestion, when my sponsor told me you ought to start doing relay, you ought to get on relay, and what that is every Friday night, and I had like 3 or 4 years, every Friday night, and I was married between the hours of 9 p.m. and 9 a.m. the next morning. If you called AA, you got me for 8 years. I'm not bragging, I'm just reporting. And when my sponsor said to me, you ought to be doing that deal, I mean, it may have been a suggestion, but I took everything my sponsor said as an order. Now, I'm not saying I always said, oh, yeah, that's great or fantastic, but I can tell you, I eventually wound up there. When they told me to do something, I eventually did it because maybe it's because I wanted them to like me. That same thing that used to get me in trouble out there, wanting you to like me. I wound up in all sorts of stupid situations, spending money I don't have, buying shit I don't even need to impress people I didn't like so that you would like me, you would accept me. There's all sorts of trouble I got in because I was more worried about what the people in AA would like me, whether the alcoholics would like me, whether everybody would like me, whether the girl would like me. I wasn't the leader. I was a follower. All AAs are followers. They're all begging, please love me. Please don't reject me. They all have no inner strength at all. They're all full of shit, like me. You know, what do they call us, egomaniacs with inferiority complex?
Yeah.
Well, you know, that's exactly, it's true, but I believe that my first 30 years on the planet, I may have been an egomaniac with an inferiority complex, but if you saw me, you'd say he's an egomaniac. That's what you think I was, because that's what I tried to show. That's what I tried to show. But the truth is, anybody who really was honest and knew there was something wrong with that guy. There's something wrong with that guy. And there was something wrong with me, but I didn't see it. I didn't see it until I got pummeled, and I had to come in here. And so that's the bottom line. So my sponsor told me to do this thing, and I remember one night it was like 2:00 in the morning. I got a call from a nurse. She had a PhD in nursing. She had a little child. She was actually an alcoholic. And she was calling me up. She had a year sobriety, and she was under the supervision of that. What's the people that supervise you? What's the name of them? PRN. They were being supervised, and she had a drink, and she was scared, and she called me up. She called up AA. She called me up, and she said, I'm scared. I'll lose my kid. I'll lose my license. I won't be able to practice. I don't know what to do. I need to know how to stay sober. And I said, and she said, there's only one problem. And I said, what's that? He says, the one problem is I don't want to hear anything about Alcoholics Anonymous. And I said, look, I got to explain something to you. We got a couple of problems here. He says, what's that? He says, first of all, I'm in AA, and I'm sober 3 or 4 years, and I'm sober because I go to AA. So if you call me up and say you want to know how to stay sober, but you don't want to hear anything about AA, it's like a non-starter with me because I don't know what Plan B is, you know? He says, well, what's the second problem? He says, you called AA. That's how fucking brilliant we are, you know what I mean? You called AA. So what I'm telling you is this. I'm telling you, Emmis, I'm telling you the truth about my life. This isn't like, what happens is we may be intelligent as shit. You may be the most intelligent. You are more intelligent than me. I used to be very intelligent. I was also, when I was intelligent, you know what? I rationalize. I tell myself rational lies. I'm so intelligent, I drink myself out of a marriage. I drink myself out of a house. I get myself in all sorts of jams because I'm brilliant. And I buy my own bullshit. You know what I mean? I believe my own bullshit. You may be intelligent, but there's a difference between intelligence and wisdom. I mean, you can intelligently argue with somebody and have the last word and do a power-driven argument and make them your enemy forever, or you could use wisdom and say, I'm just not going to argue the thing. I say, yeah, okay, you're right, and walk away, you know, and not do any damage to anybody, you know. There's intelligence and then there's wisdom. And wisdom you learn through experience with people and how you deal with people. And all you have to do is look at your life and see how intelligent you are for the last 10, 15, 20 years and where it got you. You know, and the bottom line is, I was trained from the beginning. I didn't say, hey, let's go out and help somebody. There was a time I wanted to go back to my bar and I brought my big book. I told my son, I'm going back to my bar, I'm going to bring a big book. It doesn't work. I'm just telling you right now. After 6 months, don't go back to your bar with the big book and use it as a coaster. They'll use it as a coaster. You know, they're not interested. It's not. But the bottom line is, I had sponsors and people in my life, and their whole life. You know, I said something in the beginning. I said I went to, even before Zoom, I went to 3 meetings. I did this. I did. That's all they did. Their whole life was AA. You know, and they were lawyers. They were this, but their whole life was AA. It says you didn't even know I realized the other day I have no hobbies. I realized everybody has a hobby, right? Well, I don't remember any of my sponsors or any of my mentors having hobbies. Their hobby was Alcoholics Anonymous. Yeah. And I know for a fact that I did what I did as far as helping people and going on wet drunk calls and all that sort of stuff and going on that relay thing and doing what I did because my sponsors told me to do this. And probably, more than likely, I did it because I wanted to please them. I mean, our motives, alcoholic motives, are strange. You never know what your real motive is, you know? And most of the time when I was doing things, it was to please somebody or so they'd like me or they'd respect me or, you know, maybe they look up, whatever it is. But here's the deal. Here's the difference. Somewhere along the line, maybe at around 15 years or 20 years or something like that, my whole motivation for this thing changed. And that's made all the difference in my life as far as 12-step work and helping other people and wanting to be available. And when that changed, my whole life changed, because my motivation was, most people are motivated to do all this stuff that we do, and not only because they don't want to drink, because they've somehow figured out if they don't go to meetings, they'll drink. If they don't do the steps, they'll drink. If they don't get a sponsor, they'll drink. That's why they come in here and they say, well, I drank again, I'm picking up it, but this time I'm going to do everything right. That means I'm going to do the 4-step, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. They do this thing because they're ordered or they're required to do it, or they think they have to do it. It's like going to jail. A becomes like a coffin, like a jail. Like that. I have to do it in order to stay sober. But you know something that happens? Everybody who stays sober for a long period of time, I don't know everybody, maybe just a lot of people, gets to the point where they stop worrying about drinking. And they're living in this materialistic world. And they're living in this world with the same alcoholic brain that they had when they walked in here. And now they have a car, and they have a house, and they have 2 cars or 3 cars. They got kids, they got a wife, they got all the crazy stuff that's going on in the world, all the stuff you have to do. And they're not worried about drinking anymore because they're doing all this stuff. And people are asking them to chair meetings, and they're doing all this stuff. And you know something? They stop doing this stuff. You know why? Because they don't have to do this stuff, because they're sober. They're sober. And they're the ones that get unhappy and get suicidal and maybe drink again and all that sort of stuff. Somewhere along the lines with me is the whole thing changed. At some point in time, I was going downhill and somebody told me to go to Bible study, which is what they were doing back then. I went there. I started developing a personal relationship with God. The thing that I got on my knees for, like 20 years before that, started developing a personal relationship. And I started believing, now get this is total crazy bullshit, that God had a plan for me. I was told when I first came to AA, if you don't have a purpose in your life by the time you're 25 years old, you're going to be to a certain extent neurotic. And let me tell you what's not a purpose. Getting laid is not a purpose. Getting a Porsche is not a purpose. Being a big shot is not a purpose. Going to the football game, the Super Bowl is not a purpose. Those things will keep you distracted and busy for a long period of time, make you think you're a real champ. You're hanging around with other people that have money. That's not a purpose. That's not a sufficient purpose to stop you from drinking. Or as a matter of fact, that kind of stuff, that ego-driven kind of stuff, will get you sick. And I started buying into the stuff because that's the books I was reading, the people I was hanging out for. This is my true purpose, my true job was to be of maximum service to God, who is real, who I have to have a relationship with and help other people. I stole that. That's not from me. That's from the big book about alcoholics. I started believing this shit. I'll tell you, you're really in trouble when you start buying into this crap. And when I started buying into the stuff that was my purpose, you know what happened? I would get to a point where I had to drive like 50 miles or 60 miles to do a step meeting or something like that, and I was tired, and I didn't want to go, but I did it anyway. And the reason I did it anyway was not because I was worried about drinking. I did it anyway because I knew that's what God wanted. I knew that's what the Lord wanted me to do. And another thing really happened, that when I started doing what I thought God wanted me to do, and I was trying to please Him, like that lady said to Bill Wilson, he says, your job is to please God. Stop trying to be about pleasing alcoholics or other people in your life. When I started doing that, I started really having a joyous life. I started feeling really good about myself. Not like I'm a big shot or anything, but because I'm actually doing something that's worthwhile, what the Lord wants me to do. And that's about the same time that I stopped worrying about what kind of car I was driving, or what kind of clothes I had, or what my weight was, or all that other bullshit. You know what I mean? Yeah. And that's about the time where I stopped getting all anxious about crap. You understand? And so that's what I do. And so when you think, well, he goes to foreman, that's kind of big. I'm having a blast. I'm laughing all the way to the bank on this deal, because that's my purpose. Yeah. And quite frankly, the way I read the big book, it sort of matches up with what they're saying. I see all sorts of stuff in the big book in the 12 and 12, and also talk about the Gold Touch. They say, well, this is what's supposed to happen. Now, how many people in AA do you think do that stuff? Believe this stuff? How many people do you think are really doing this stuff? And listen, just like Dr. Bob said, this takes a lot of practice. This isn't like a 3 months. I picked up a 3-month chip and I feel it's like I wasn't doing this talk in 3 months. I wasn't doing it 3 years. I wasn't doing it at 5. I wasn't doing it at 10 years. I wasn't doing it at 15 years. You know, now it's over for me. You know, say to yourself, you know, I got nothing more to live for. So this is, you know, this is what I do. But the thing is, I come here, you know, they're paying me this huge amount of money to come here. So I might as well tell you the truth, right?
Yeah.
The truth is easy because I was there when it happened, and I'm here right now. So if I had to bullshit you and have to memorize all sorts of stuff and figure out something, so I just tell you the truth, and this is all I'm supposed to do here. What I'm supposed to do is, in my own language, from my own point of view, tell you how I developed a relationship with God. And part of my relationship with God, a major part, is forgetting about myself and my life and turning my life and will over to God. And if you turn your life and your will over to God, then what you're doing is you're doing this stuff. You're not doing anything else. You're doing this stuff. And if you happen to be doing something else, it's you're doing something else on the side, but you're really long to do this stuff. You know, I'm going on a cruise because my wife wants to go on a cruise. So I love my wife. I got to go on the cruise with her. A cruise I don't really want to go on, but I'm going to go with her because I am sober and I can't be totally selfish. But when I go to the cruise, you know why I don't want to go on the cruise? The only reason I don't want to go on the cruise, I've been on a lot of cruises, is because I'll miss my AA meetings. Talk about sick. Talk about crazy. I'll miss the people, my sponsees, Miami. But you know what I figure? I'll figure out find some AA meetings on the cruise.
You will.
I'll find and I have Zoom now. Man, if you got Zoom, you're made in the shade. I can still go to all my meetings and stuff like that.
You want to thank the group?
What?
You want to thank the
I
group?
want to thank the group for allowing me to share all this stuff with you guys. You know, by the way, don't get upset about anything I said. I'll probably leave here, and on the way home I'll say, why did I say all that shit? And I'll change my mind. You know what I mean? I say, I don't believe in any of that. You know what I mean? So thank you very much.